What's up, family? I'm live. Hopefully, everyone is having a good 4th of July weekend. If you celebrate it, I don't really get into celebrating it because, we as foundational Black Americans, we weren't, free at at that time. You know what I mean? Our ancestors was, still enslaved, truth be told. So I consider Juneteenth, my 4th of July. You know what I mean? Because that was when, our ancestors got their independence. You know what I mean? So to each his own. If you celebrate it and whatnot, I just decided to go live. Really wasn't going to go live, you know what I mean? I was going to tap in with myself, but I was like, yeah, I ain't been live in a while, you know what I mean? And I didn't put out no video yesterday, so I might as well, go live and tap in with the family, you know. And I ain't gonna be on here too long, family either. So I'm gonna get right into it. I ain't gonna waste no time. Um, the first thing I want to touch on is, Big Boy, our brother Big Boy, Outkast, his uncle, I didn't know this till someone, shared the information with me. His uncle was unfortunately killed in a road rage incident, which is senseless. Nothing on that road should, I don't give a damn what it is, should result in this, you know what I mean? Someone losing their life. Now, his uncle was shot in the back by a young dude, and he had a girl with him in the car, so the both have been picked up, on discharge, and it's just a sad, unfortunate set of circumstances. It happened down there in Atlanta. I believe his uncle was like 62 or something like that, and just a bunch of nonsense. You know what I mean? Young cats doing things, off the top of the head without thinking. That's why you can never make moves, truth be told, without thinking. You know what I mean? You're supposed to use your intelligence over emotion, because the heat of the moment and the argument could, end up in you losing the rest of your life. So it's two lives, three lives lost actually. Big Boy's uncle and the young dude that did it, and the girl that he was with as well. Because they said the girl, tried to cover up for him. When the authorities, came to confront her about the situation. So she gonna be probably charged as an accomplice for being there, covering it up, this, that, and the other. So I got the audio and the video of our brother Big Boy, from Outkast, his uncle, Sally, and unfortunately, being gunned down over a road rage incident, which is a bunch of nonsense, and we're gonna talk about it, family.
Am I the only one
Great
that
news.
didn't know Outkast's Big Boy just lost his uncle to a senseless act of road rage? The story is heartbreaking, and it's got the whole hip-hop community talking. Let's break it down. Ramoyne Patton, known as Uncle Mooney, was killed on June 16th in Atlanta. He was 62, and the beloved uncle of Outkast's Big Boy. Police say Patton was trying to make a turn when a verbal argument broke out with another driver. That
Yeah, they say some kind of argument ensued, but argument or not, that should have never resulted with, this our brother losing his life, over an argument. And now, truth be told, it was a young cat, so he done this, off the top of the head. Now he gonna be in jail crying and complaining, because they gonna give him buku years for this, as he should. You know what I mean? Because you can't just do things, half cocked off the top of the dome without, thinking. You always got to use intelligence over emotions. That's something I tell myself, constantly on a regular basis, because you never know. You can go out in the community, and get into an argument with Joe Blow, you know what I mean? And you just always got to use intelligence over emotions. Always lead with your mind first, not, your heart. Because when you lead with your heart and emotion, that'll bring you in all kinds of trouble.
argument ended when the other driver shot Patton in the back. Patton's car crashed into a vacant house. Authorities found him there, but it was too late. Two people were arrested: 18-year-old Jabrion Crumbly, charged with murder, and 32-year-old Janisha Crumbly, accused of helping him avoid arrest. Big Boy says the tragedy has pierced the heart of my family. He called his Uncle Unc to all that met him, showing just how loved he was. The community is grieving and calling for peace on our streets.
Yeah, family. Sad, unfortunate set of circumstances. RIP to, Big Boy's uncle, and my condolences goes out to his friends and family. But moving right along, I'm pretty sure by now, everyone has heard our brother Young Noble of the Outlaws, Tupac's group, the Outlaws, has, sadly, unfortunately, taken his own life, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And that's sad and unfortunate. But they say he been going through, some things for a while, and nobody, the signs were there, I'm hearing, and, sadly and unfortunately, nobody, adhere to that, that, because a lot of times people don't actually want to take their lives, their behavior might start, switching up. They might, begin to, act, in other ways, that ain't, their normal self. And you got to, heed the signs when things like that is going down, because a lot of times people are crying, and in the inside, they crying out, for help, and that's why they begin to, display these different types of behaviors that's, uh, other than they self, because they said, Young Noble issued a Nas diss, you know what I mean? And he was trying to, go at some of the other outlaw members, and, allegedly, before he took his life, sadly and unfortunately, he got into some kind of like altercation down there in Atlanta. This also happened in Atlanta. They found him with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and there ain't, truth be told, but a few, living members of the Outlaws left, because a lot of them, died under, mysterious circumstances, and Fatal just died not too long ago, in a car accident, and then you had Yafula, he died like right after, our brother Pop was taken up out of here. You know what I mean? He got killed, so it's just a lot of, unfortunate set of circumstances, surrounding the Outlaws, because truth be told, the Outlaws is one of the most, they're up there on top tier rap groups of all time, but they never got the proper recognition, and they were blackballed to a certain degree, if you ask me, because, once our brother Tupac left the scene, he had been engaged in so much beef that the industry, truth be told, they blackballed the, Outlaws and stopped them from, getting their proper shine on, you know what I mean? So they never received, all of the credits and accolades they should, because the Outlaws is lyrical beasts, and they said, Young Noble was raising a kid with special needs. One of his kids had special needs. So, that kid, I don't know what's going to happen with his young child, now. And they say he, leaves behind family and that young kid. So I don't know what's going to become of that. You know what I mean? It's just sad and unfortunate. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we got to check on our people. We see people, acting differently other than, the normal way they act, what we know them, the character traits we know them to, display. We got to check on them, because in all actuality, a lot of people be crying out for help, and people don't really want to, unalive themselves. But sometimes, you fighting them inner demons, you know what I mean? And it ain't no excuse, for unaliving yourself, you know what I mean? Because that's, something that you just shouldn't do in any, situation. You always got to use intelligence over emotion. But, and I was told, there's a hefty price to pay, in the afterworld for that. So, that's something you never want to do. But in all actuality, sometimes when folks are crying out, we got to make sure that we there for them, and we pulling our folks up, without any mental battles they going through. Because a lot of times people just want help. They don't want to really do this, to themselves. They just, be crying out for help, and, that help goes unanswered. So ultimately, they end up doing this, but this ain't never the way to go about it, because ain't no situation, in life, that great for you to take your own life, to me. You know what I mean? But, RIP to that brother, Young Noble, because the Outlaws were lyrical beasts. Like I said, they were blackballed in that industry. They never hit their true, peak in that industry, and that was because design, because Pac wasn't here, and, they lost several of their key members. So, I just want to say RIP to Young Noble, and my condolences goes out to his friends and family. And when you got, people in your life that you really love and care about, family, make sure you tapping in with them and, checking on them, once in a while. If you don't hear from somebody, just, pick up the phone. How, what's going on, and hear from you in a while. Just make sure them people are all right in all actuality, because some people, they be crying out for help, you know what I mean? And they right there on that edge, you know what I mean? And you never know what could push someone off an edge. But, taking your life is, never a good thing, you know what I mean? Because there's always going to be brighter days ahead, you know what I mean? You might be going through some dark times right now, but, things always change, momentum always changes, energy always moves around. So, just because you're in a bad slump right now, it's going to get better, you know what I mean? But RIP to Young Noble, because like I said, the Outlaws were lyrical beasts, you know what I mean, that never got to their full potential. And that was because of a multitude of things, including, Pac being taken away. But if Pac was, still around, you could bet the Outlaws, they would have been up there on top tier groups, you know what I mean? But moving right along, like I said, I ain't gonna be on here too long. I don't know if any of the family has seen, but Trump, as he's bringing about some allegate alligator Alcatraz over there in the Florida Everglades, and this is going to be, a housing detainment center for, I guess, illegal undocumented immigrants, you know what I mean? And it sounds a little bit inhumane to me, but, in all actuality, when you coming over here illegally, you committing a crime. So, I suggest people, start getting it together in their homelands because they implementing a lot of things that's, they're gonna have strict and tough penalties on these people, that's just coming over here all willy nilly without the right paperwork, and they trying to bring about a alligator Alcatraz out there in the Florida Everglades, and that's surrounded by nothing but alligators out there, family. I've long heard stories about people going missing in the Florida Everglades, and it ain't no coincidence what happened to them once they go missing out there in the Florida Everglades. Them damn alligators get them. I done heard stories of man eating alligators out there in the Florida Everglades. You know what I mean? And I got the audio and the video of now Trump talking about this alligator Alcatraz out there in the Florida Everglades, and we're gonna walk through and talk about it how we normally do, family. Fair use. But let me pull this video up real quick. Yeah, people might as well just start getting it together in their homeland though, because it's about to start getting real for them over here, coming over here without the right paperwork and documentation. And I've been locked up before. At least in your homeland, you got it. You're still able, to be free and move and shake. If they put you in this damn alligator Alcatraz, you locked down, you out there in the Florida Everglades, and it ain't no escaping because Trump even said himself, this is he don't need to employ security officers and stuff like
Think
that.
you know Harbor Freight? Think again. We've introduced.
He said himself he don't need to employ security officers, family, because the alligators are his security officers. You know what I mean? So it's going to get real for people who want to cross that border all willy nilly, without the right paperwork. Hopefully I didn't get copyrighted, man. I was trying to that commercial wouldn't stop damn playing. Hold on, family. Fair use.
The snakes are fast, but alligators are. But we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay, if they escape prison.
U.S. President Donald Trump traveled to Florida Tuesday to inspect the site of a controversial new migrant detention center dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. Now, this remote facility is being reconfigured at a cost.
It sounds a little inhumane, but on the other hand, we can't be having people come over here all willy-nilly without the right paperwork and documentation. So people might want to start getting it together in their homeland. You know what I mean? You under an oppressive system over there, regime, work to clean it up, work to make it better, because everybody can't, it's just not logical for everybody to keep flooding the United States. That's something that we can't have, you know what I mean? Because that puts a strain and a burden on our economy, things and prices start going up. They draining resources that could be going to, American citizens. So, I ain't got to be brought to it, but if people want to come over here, they're going to have a hefty price to pay. You see, trying to build an alligator, Alcatraz out there in the Florida Everglades, so ain't no escaping that, and I question, would you even want to escape, because you ain't going to make it out there in the Florida Everglades. They got big ass alligators out there, and I've long heard stories, like I said, of, people getting eaten by man-eating alligators out there, you know what I mean, and never to resurface.
Cost of $450 million U.S. to hold undocumented immigrants in the middle of the Everglades.
It's a model going forward, Mr. President?
It can be. I mean, you don't always have land so beautiful and so secure. We have a lot of bodyguards and a lot of cops that are in the form of alligators. You don't have to pay them so much. But I wouldn't want to run through.
He keeps saying it right there, bodyguards in the form of alligators, because when them alligators get a hold of your ass, ain't none of you ever going to be found, nothing.
The Everglades for long. It will keep people where they're supposed to be. This is a very important thing.
We've got very red states that should be doing this just as much as Florida's doing. That will increase their numbers. And then what happens?
And if they doing it down there in Florida, which is a red state, they're going to try to implement that maybe in all red states. You know what I mean? So it's just not looking good for people who want to come over here all willy-nilly. It sounds a little bit inhumane, but on the other hand, you got to look at it as we can't keep housing all these damn, people that want to flee from their country over here to America. It just, ain't economic. You know what I mean? Because it's straining the resources of this nation, and it's making things, that money got to be offset somehow. So they're going to raise prices of things, you know what I mean? And It's just, FBA brothers and sisters, can't even get the proper adequate resources and stuff they need because every time we turn around, all of our damn resources is going out the window to all of these damn immigrants that want to flock over here, from all these other countries, instead of what they should be doing on the other hand is staying in their homeland and working to make that better. You know what I mean? Because we can't have all of them over here. It just, ain't economical.
Is you'll have a lot of people that will deport on their own because they don't want to end up in an Alligator, Alcatraz, or some of those other places. So I think this is a model, but we need other states to step up.
The Florida Everglades to open America's newest migrant detention center. It's incredibly built, and you're seeing that yourself. That's why I said let the press join us on our walk so they can see what's happening. It's known as Alligator Alcatraz, which is very appropriate.
Alligator Alcatraz, that even sounds crazy. Truth be told, they're going to start imposing real strict and tough penalties on these people, who think they're going to come over here all willy-nilly. So they'd probably be better off just staying home. You know what I mean? Because if, Alligator Alcatraz, I for sure as hell wouldn't want to go there if the, roles were reversed and the shoe was on the other foot. And I was, an immigrant. I would just want to stay in my homeland. You know what I mean? And, and make that better. I wouldn't want to come over here without the right paperwork and things like that. Because I for sure as hell wouldn't want to be sending nothing called no Alligator Alcatraz. But if you're new to my channel, family, make sure you like and subscribe. You know what I mean? And subscribe to my channel because, I put out a lot of, FBA truth, and a lot of the times, the algorithm be trying to suppress me and, just do a bunch of nonsense when it comes to my videos. So make sure you stay locked in and tapped in with me.
Because I looked outside and that's not a place I want to go hiking anytime soon. But very soon this facility will house some of the most menacing migrants, some of the most vicious people on the planet.
And another thing, like Trump was saying, another element, we don't know all of these people coming over here, in masses like that. We don't know who the hell we getting over here. We could be getting serial killers, rapists, you name it, that's coming over here all willy-nilly, and they do bring elements to crime, even to the FBA community. You know what I mean? Because all of these damn people, aren't, on the up and up. Some of them people weren't worth a damn in their homeland, and we get them over here committing all sorts of crimes and things like that, weird types of crimes in the neighborhood. So it got to be, stopped, or it got to be, regulated and controlled to where though, all of them ain't just flocking up over here in masses. People got to, stay in their homeland and take care of what needs to be taken care of there. So, they can have a quality of life over there. You know what I mean? Because it's economically draining, the U.S. and, when American citizens, red, white, whatever color they are, purple, yellow, they can't get the resources they need because it's being, given to all of these people coming over here. You know what I mean? They give them a leg up soon as they come over here. They roll the red carpet out for them. And, the Democrats were responsible for a lot of that nonsense, though. And let's continue.
Surrounded by miles of treacherous swampland, and the only way out is really deportation. And a lot of these people are self-deporting back to their country where they came from.
Yeah, a lot of people ain't going to want to deal with that because that's a hefty price to pay, Alligator Alcatraz, but like I said, I wasn't going to be on here too long, family. So we're going to be moving right along. And I almost forgot I wanted to go here with it over there in Philly. I'm in Pennsylvania, but in Philadelphia, PA, it's a lot of, the trash workers, the sanitation workers, the city sanitation workers are on strike, because they say that the mayor over there in Philly ain't willing to meet their demands, as far as pay. They want more pay. And truth be told, you got to pay people right. Doing a trash collecting job, that's a dirty job. You can't just, expect people to do it, but you're not giving them the right adequate pay. You got to pay people. But, the trash is piling up. They say the city streets is, smelling like garbage, a garbage can. You know what I mean? Trash piled up, look like mountain high, amounts of trash, on the city streets. And it's all because they say the trash union can't come in alignment and agreement with, the Philadelphia mayor. They haven't, reached an agreement. On the other hand, though, the mayor, she's saying that they, are trying to come to the table, but the trash workers, ain't trying to, play ball with them. But, you got to pay people adequately. But on the other hand, the trash workers, they might also have to, if they getting something, that's more than what they were getting, they might just have to play ball with that. You know what I mean? because it got to be fair to where though, everybody getting their demands met. But, just leaving trash in the city streets, that ain't going to be it. It's going to be, a hefty price to pay that goes along with that. You know what I mean? Rats and, it could bring sickness and illness to the community, all of that dirt, piling up, in the streets, and it's right next to schools. It could potentially get kids sick, so somebody got to give in a little bit and, play ball on either end or maybe both ends. If both sides, give in a little bit, this would probably, facilitate, the trash workers being able to get back out there and work. You know what I mean? But you got to pay people on the other hand. You can't expect people, a lot of times with the jobs nowadays, they want people to do, all of this damn work and they not giving you adequate funds to do the work. So you got to pay people they worth. But I got the audio and the video of, the trash, getting mountains high out there in Philadelphia, PA, and we gonna walk through and talk about it how we normally do, family. Fair use.
Many streets are lined with piles. The city is starting to smell. Many streets are lined with piles and piles of trash, some so big they're taller than people. Let's go to our Dan Snyder. Dan, that is a massive pile of trash. We can't.
Damn, did you hear that, family? That's a massive pile of trash. Like this news reporter said, to just be laying out there on the street all willy-nilly, this is going to cause sickness in the community, rats, infestation of mice, you name it. And, they saying that this is, in close proximity to a school, which could potentially get young children sick. So this ain't a good look. Somebody got to play ball, or both of them got to give in to, get this goal, man, of, getting this trash out of the streets. You know what I mean? But you got to pay those workers their proper pay, though.
Can't even see you with all of this in our camera.
Yeah, Aziza, I'm here. I promise. I'm actually downwind of the trash, maybe the worst place you could possibly be. But just wanted to give you a visual representation of how high the trash has piled up here at Princeton and Hawthorne in Mayfair. This has accumulated throughout the day, going up and up and up. Now, I can tell you, within the last hour, a Philly Police Department officer and a member of the Streets Department has actually come out here. They're directing.
You got to think about it. You got trash that high just laying on a city street corner. That's going to cause sickness, illness to the community, with a whole bunch of, animal infestations, you name it.
People away from here, telling them to go to State Road in Ashburner. That's one of the convenience centers, so nobody else can continue to build this up as they look for ways to get it cleaned up. And, we can bring you the visuals. We can show you how high this has come up. What we can't bring you is the smell. We'll let the people who were here do that for you.
I wouldn't even want to be there if I was a news reporter in his shoes. I wouldn't even be standing that close to it because that smell, ain't nothing to be smelling.
The stench is unbelievable.
It wasn't nice in the car because of the smell, but it's not fun.
Trash continues to pile up and up and up at the corner of Princeton and Hawthorne in Mayfair. Most people who stop by
it looked like a mountain of, trash sitting out there, truth be told.
Today, abandoned the dumpster or were unwilling to navigate their way around the heaping mounds of garbage to get there.
No, actually it's grown. In like the past couple of days, it's grown so much.
It's just going to keep piling up and piling up. We're going to have rats here tonight like this.
Patrick Glynn lives.
I agree. They're going to have, rats, mice, you name it. This what the city might have to do, until they reach a settlement, with the trash workers along with that mayor, till they come to a conclusion, that's adequate to both parties. They might have to, start designate like a lot or something where though, the residents could throw it, in like a vacant lot or something, to where though it can be monitored and regulated. But this right here, this is going to cause sickness and a whole bunch of stuff, to even the people you see as houses in that vicinity, and apartments and stuff. So, this is going to cause a whole bunch of illness if it's left unattended to the people that live in that vicinity, not to mention they going to say, when I let the video play a little bit more, that it's, schools in that vicinity. So it's just nothing good is going to come out of just letting, the trash lay there all willy-nilly like that.
lives down the road from the drop site.
This is what you see, and it's going to get worse and worse.
And Frank Copley lives across the street.
It's frustrating what they're doing to the city.
The two men say one of their biggest frustrations as they watch this trash pile up, seeing people dump seemingly anything and everything.
And people are leaving furniture, beds, TVs.
They're just coming here and dumping. Contractors. I've seen people doing lawn, landscaping stuff thrown out here. I've seen the whole 9 yards.
Neighbors also pointed out that this city drop-off site sits about 50 yards from Mayfair Elementary, a school that is still hosting kids in summer programs. People
see, and it's still kids going to that school for summer programs, so that's not good, having that in the vicinity of young children, who could possibly, come in contact with that trash and get an illness, this, that, and the other. It's a bunch of nonsense, so they're going to have to reach a conclusion, to where though both parties are satisfied in order to start getting some of that trash collected.
People in the area questioned the placement of the dumpster here.
They got 2 football fields, parking lot. Why did they have to put it in the middle of the sidewalk?
See, that's what I'm saying. They said 2 football fields. It's got to be a big enough area, until they get a settlement, that's adequate for both parties to where though they could dump this kind of thing, because, dumping it in a city area like that in a neighborhood, that ain't it right there. That's going to cause a lot of illness and things, that's going to have consequences and repercussions.
A spokesperson for the school district says they cannot comment on city drop-off sites during this strike. We have reached out to the city for comment on this particular site. We are still waiting to hear back. Live in Mayfair, Dan Snyder, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Dan. We'll stay with CBS Philadelphia for continuing coverage of the city workers' strike. We have the latest on negotiations as well as locations where you can drop off your trash at cbsphiladelphia.com.
Now's the time to go back in time and shut.
Femi, I didn't even really realize I was cooking and I didn't even have my video window up. Nobody even let me know that in the chat, so we're going to keep continuing to cook. I was cooking and I didn't even have my damn, whereas though y'all could see me. I didn't even have the camera on me. Sorry about that, family. You know what I mean? I didn't have my camera set up right. You know what I mean? I'm learning as I go with all of this technology, and I didn't have it, but better late than never. Now I got it on though. Nobody let me know in the chat I didn't have that camera up. If I ain't writing exact, let me know, chat room, because I wasn't writing exact. I didn't even have my damn camera pulled up. But it is what it is. Better late than never. I found it. Moving right along. What's the family getting into this weekend? Anybody getting into anything? I'm not probably doing nothing but chilling. I might, go to the gym before that closes. But I want to talk about this Trump big beautiful bill, family. I'm going to pull that up because that's the last thing I wanted to talk about. Damn, I didn't even realize I didn't have my camera on though. That sucks. Well, y'all can hear my audio over top of that, so I have to be good with that. Where the hell is that at? That big beautiful bill. Here we go. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about this Trump big beautiful bill, family.
To politics now, and President Trump signing the so-called big,
because the big beautiful bill says it's gonna have cuts to EBT, food stamps, Medicaid for older adults, and it's gonna increase with border security for people not being able to come over here. I'm in alignment and agreement with that aspect, of people not coming over here, with the increases to that. But, for the most part, I'm not in alignment and agreement with this big, beautiful bill because, it's talking about tax breaks, but the tax breaks they talking about, that's going to, the rich and wealthy. That ain't benefiting, the regular average day, American citizen that's getting up, punching a time clock day in and day out. So that's not really, nothing for us, you know what I mean? And then they talking about, cuts to, resources like, Medicaid and EBT, SNAP benefits, you know what I mean? While that should be cut for, able-bodied people that's able to get out there and work. You got American citizens that might be single parents, with a child and, they're hard working, so they got to get up every morning, and they do get up every morning and go to work, but they might need a little bit of extra assistance, and, helping out with their child. So I don't like that they cutting that, while it should be cut for, able-bodied people, that can get out there and go to work, and, make things happen for themselves, but you do got on the other hand, working class American, everyday people that, need a little bit of extra assistance in the form of maybe some SNAP benefits or maybe some, extra additional Medicaid for their child. They might be raising one child on their own, and they're getting up and going to work and doing what they got to do every day because people are saying that it's just going to benefit, it's just going to hurt the immigrants coming over here because they get a lot of government assistance. Yeah, they do get a lot of government assistance, but it's not only going to affect them, with all of these cuts. To me and my knowledge and understanding, that affect, American citizens as well, who are just in need of a little bit of extra assistance, you know what I mean? That's getting up, going to work every day, punching that time clock, working hard and doing what they got to do. So, I ain't in favor of this big, beautiful bill. That sounds like something that's designed to keep the rich getting richer and the poor getting less. So I got the audio and the video of, this nonsense of the big, beautiful bill, which Trump passed on the 4th of July. He had some big, show out for it and turnout, and we're going to walk through and talk about it how we normally do, family. Fair use.
To politics now, and President Trump signing the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, hosting a celebration at the White House, now trying to sell the plan to the American people. NBC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang joins us now from Washington with more. Selena, good morning.
Hey, said Trump is now trying to sell the plan to American people. What they should do is get the American people's opinion on it before they just invoke something in the law. And this is why I ain't for either party, Democrats or Republicans, because both of them are wings off the same bird, if you ask me, and neither of them has done a damn thing nor plans to do a damn thing for my people, which is foundational Black Americans. That's why I ain't with either party, and I think, a new regime need to be, ushered into, whereas though, it ain't just two-party system that can make it into office, the Democrats or the Republicans. There need to be, a third party maybe that's, a force to be reckoned with, to where though people have a little bit, more of a alternative, to the two-party system, because the two-party system, neither of them really benefit, us the people that are, American citizens with boots on the ground going to work day in and day out. They all benefit, nothing but the wealthy, you know what I mean, and are designed to keep the rich getting richer and the poor getting less. So I think it's, far time, a new regime is ushered into, where though it's not just a two-party system, but they ain't really trying to see nothing, because they know if something like that, happens, to where though it's about the people, that's going to bring real change. And that's something they don't want to happen, is real change. They happy with the status quo. Let's continue.
Hey, Wade, good morning to you. President Trump marked July 4th with a celebration and a major political victory. His so-called Big Beautiful Bill is now the law. The president highlighting those tax cuts while downplaying slashes to Medicaid. Overnight, President Trump signing his...
And they say a lot of Medicaid is actually going to be cut in my area, too. In Pennsylvania, they say a lot of, cuts to Medicaid and things like that that's going to happen. Some of them older people, they worked all of their life. They need that damn Medicaid. You know what I mean? And like I said, people with the SNAP EBT benefits, a lot of, some of them people that get those benefits, they ain't all people that's just, laying up on the system, and not doing a damn thing, and wanting the system to take care of them. Some of them are, actually, hardworking, American citizens that need a little bit of extra help. They might be raising children, this, that, and the other, so I don't agree with that. Why it should be cut to, people that's coming over here from other countries, then being able to get a leg up off of taxpayer dollars. You got some cases where, American citizens, need a little bit of extra help, and it should be available to them. But I don't co-sign or endorse, nobody just laying up on welfare, benefiting off of the system all willy-nilly without, doing no work, to ensure that, they can take care of themselves and their kids. I don't co-sign or endorse that, but there are cases where people need a little bit of extra help and assistance.
sweeping domestic policy into law.
It's the biggest bill of its type in history.
Celebrating his legislative win during Independence Day festivities alongside Republican lawmakers who helped him muscle this bill through Congress.
Mike Johnson right there. I see Mike. What a job they've done. What a job they've done.
The motion is adopted.
The nearly 1,000-page bill barely passed Congress after Trump arm-twisted holdouts in his own party. All but 2 House Republicans ended up voting for the bill, despite anger that it could add $3.4 trillion to the debt over the next decade, and estimates that steep cuts to Medicaid could force 11.8 million Americans to lose their health insurance. The president highlighting those tax cuts, mostly for the wealthiest Americans, while ending taxes on tips and overtime and new spending for immigration enforcement.
So you have the biggest tax cut, the biggest spend.
See, I like that enforcing, immigration thing. But for the most part, this is why I don't vote, because neither of these 2 damn parties got the interests of us, the people, in mind. They both branches off the same tree. You know what I mean? That's why I say to hell with them both. We need a new party, ushered into where though it's really going to be about the people, because none of them, it's all designed, it's a game, designed to keep the rich getting richer and extracting resources from us, American citizens that's getting up doing the work thing every day. That's why I don't buy in. I'll probably never vote again, truth be told, unless a candidate get out here and talk what I want to hear, offering up cash reparations to descendants of freedmen. If they say something like that, either party, I ain't married to either party, so I get out there and vote, yesterday if one of them parties get out there and say something like that. But, until that happens, I'm holding my vote, because both of them parties can miss me, none of them, are really for us, the people, you know what I mean?
They cut the largest border security investment in American history.
Democrats confident they'll win back voters as Americans start to lose their health care and food assistance.
I don't think we have ever seen or are prepared for how catastrophic this is set to be.
The president, though, taking a victory lap.
I think had probably the most successful almost 6 months as a president.
Democrats ain't the answer either, because I don't like, a lot of the things that Trump is doing, and implementing, other than that, mass deportation thing. But the Democrats ain't the answer either, because the Democrats ain't going to do nothing but flood us out again with all of this mass immigration to the country. That's why I say, to hell with them both. A new system need to be ushered into where as though, they, catering more geared towards the people, and not big wig companies and, the rich and wealthy, because that's, truth be told, all that the Democrats and the Republicans are worried about is the elite and the wealthy.
President and the presidency.
And another moment from that July 4th celebration at the White House last night, the military members behind Operation Midnight Hammer were also honored. That's referring to those those strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities last month. And President Trump called it, quote, one of the most flawless military campaigns in U.S. history.
Well, that is.
And one thing I didn't really touch on that when they did that strike, to that other country, I forget where it is, but the United States is worried about putting their nose in everyone's business and affairs. While I love the United States, because us foundational Black Americans, work to make it. America ain't without her flaws, but it's still one of the best places to live on in this world. And we as foundational Black Americans work to make that so. So I never, shit on my country, but America just puts her nose in affairs and things that don't belong to her, you know what I mean? Because we got to start focusing on in-house and stop with all of this damn, it got money for war, but where is our money for reparations? We need that check cut for reparations, you know what I mean? So instead of fighting wars, that could be money that's going to foundational Black American freedmen reparations. That's why I say it's a game on, both sides and both ends of the spectrum, because the Democrats and the Republicans, don't give a damn about us foundational Black Americans. Truth be told, I think it's time, it's been time as of yesterday for a new regime to be ushered into where though it's going to be more geared towards the people, you know what I mean? Because neither of these parties, I see people, getting all excited and geared up about, Democrats or the Republicans when they give a damn about us, the people, Trump don't even give a damn about, white people, truth be told, that's living in the trailer park. He only give a damn about the elite class of white people, you know what I mean? The corporate class, you know what I mean? That's, owning businesses and institutions, you know what I mean? They give a damn about, the poor people. It's all about, keeping the rich getting richer and the poor getting less.
Is something to definitely watch with future assessments. But Selena, while we have you, we're also seeing both Republicans and Democrats thinking this bill could actually help them heading into the midterms.
Yeah, Whit, in both parties, they're racing to shape the narrative around this, and the timing here is really critical. So the extension of President Trump's 2017 tax cuts, that bill makes that permanent. While when it comes to ending no taxes on tips, while that goes into effect pretty quickly, it expires in 2028. As for those cuts to Medicaid, now that doesn't go into effect until after the midterms next year, but the effects are already being felt. In fact, a rural hospital in Nebraska.
See, Trump just getting in there signing stuff away with the flick of a pen, but there's consequences and repercussions to pay for things. You know what I mean? He just blatantly doing shit with disregard. So, there's consequences and repercussions that go along with things. You know what I mean? And the people that's going to have to pay for, the consequences and repercussions is us, American citizens that get up and go to work every day, because the elite and the wealthy, it's going to be normal protocol for them. They still going to be moving and shaking.
Nebraska announced that it's shutting down, citing those expected Medicaid cuts. Now, Democrats really see this as their potential ticket to a comeback. They believe that once Americans start to feel these real-world effects hitting home, that they're going to turn towards the Democrats. Whit?
Nah, the Democrats ain't the answer either, nor the Republicans. Like I said, the hell with them both. There need to be a new party ushered into where, though, they really going to be about the people and making some changes. Because like I said, I give a damn about either of these parties. I ain't married to neither of them. If either of these parties to get out here and say, I'm offering up cash reparations to freedmen, I'll be the first person in line voting for them. But until that happens, I'm keeping my vote, because neither of these parties are worthy of my vote, because they're doing not a damn thing for the American people. But yeah, closing, family, I'm about to get off of here. I just wanted to hop on here real quick, and I didn't even know that I wasn't on camera with you guys till it was too late. But that comes with the territory, along with being a content creator. But next time, family, if y'all in the chat, let me know if y'all can't see me on screen or something like that. And have a good weekend, family. And be safe out there. Hopefully you spending your weekend with family and friends, and doing something. It's nice weather out there. I like to get out in the, the sunlight, and get some of that vitamin D whenever it's nice out. So, be aware, family, and stay safe, because to be aware is to be alive. Just my thoughts on the matter. Peace.